Hello, this is Justin with the chess website. Today I'm going to be talking about the Gunderam Defense. This is not a very common opening, not something you're going to see a lot, but I wanted to talk about it because I think it's really important for understanding how to punish bad openings. So I would consider a bad opening any opening where they ignore the opening principles, so they aren't developing their pieces, they aren't castling um, stuff like that. So the Gunderam defense starts with e4, e5, knight to f3, attacking the pawn. And here, there's a lot of different ways to defend the pawn. The most common and classically proven to be good is knight to c6. But here, the Gunderam defense is queen to e7. So trying to defend this pawn like this. So the reason that this is not considered a good opening is because instead of developing your minor pieces, your knights and bishops, you're bringing your queen out early. And typically, bringing your queen out early isn't great because your opponent can attack that queen while improving their own pieces. So, for example, if I had a knight on c3 here, I could bring this knight to d5, centralizing the knight and gaining time by attacking that queen. So now black has to spend time to deal with it. So anyway, after queen to e7, the best way to punish this kind of opening where they aren't developing their pieces like naturally, we want to make sure that we prioritize our development so we get a lead in development. We have more pieces out than they have. And we also, once we're set up, once we're castled, we want to try to open up the center. So I'll show you how an example of how this can be done. So we just develop our bishop naturally. This is a very normal move, bringing our bishop to a nice square, essentially eyeing this f7 square, and also allowing us to castle on the next turn. So now knight to f6, they're attacking this pawn. So again, we want to develop quickly, so we play knight to c3. Perfect. Now we brought another piece out and we dealt with black's threat. So black, if they're smart, is going to keep trying to develop. Um, so another downside of bringing the queen to e7 is it blocks this bishop. Usually this bishop wants to come out this way, but with this queen in the way, it just can't do that. So a plan that might make sense for black would be to try to get this bishop out this way, maybe get the bishop to g7 instead. However, if they do this, it starts to run into some issues. So if they play g6, now we can right away punish this bad opening by playing knight to g5. So we've seen this kind of idea with the knight and the bishop lining up on this f7 square in openings like the fried liver attack. Now here, black really doesn't have a great way of dealing with it because the only way to stop us from taking on f7 is to play a move like d5. And in response to this, we could just take it. And typically, black has some sort of compensation in return for giving up this pawn. But in this case, they really have nothing because we are so far ahead in developments, and black has a hard time getting their pieces ready to castle. We have ideas of playing d6 with the idea of opening up that bishop towards f7. A lot of very dangerous ideas here for white. So knight to g5 is very dangerous. But for example, if black played knight to c6 here, again, they're trying to keep pace. They're trying to keep developing their own pieces. But if we just castle, they really can't keep pace. There's no developing move here for black that improves their position. So, for example, like they would love to develop these bishops next, but there's no bishop move. Both of their bishops are blocked by their own pieces. So it's going to take them more time to get it developed. And on top of that, we've already got 3 versus 2 pieces developed. Plus, we're castled, so I consider that 4v2. So white has a huge lead in development and should have a very nice position here. So let's look at if we tried to still be aggressive and play knight to g5. So here we can do this. There's nothing terribly wrong with this, but there is a little weird looking trap here that I wanted to show. So if we got too aggressive too quickly before we castled, black might try to do something like play h6. And this looks kind of weird because they're just inviting us to take on f7. So the idea isn't actually to attack this knight. The idea is to seal the exit for the knight. So here, this knight has no way of returning back into the game. All of these squares are covered. So all black has to do is play a move like rook h7, and eventually they're going to be able to corral this knight. And they're just going to say it's trapped. So weird, very bizarre knight trap here, but um, black is actually okay here. So we have to be a little careful. Um, it's just best to keep things simple in these kinds of situations and develop our pieces. So if we just castle, everything's going to be okay. So now, after d6, this is really the point I wanted to emphasize. When our opponent is playing a bad opening, how do we punish it? We punish it by opening the center. If we can open up the center, our pieces will have more scope and they'll be able to shine in that position when the position opens up. While our opponent's pieces, stuck on the back rank, not really having developed, are going to kind of be seen in greater lights, and that lack of development will stick out like a sore thumb. So try to think about how would we open up this position if we were white. So here, the move I really like here is to play d4. So we're striking in the center, right? There's this tension here. But again, the reason we're doing this is because we have this massive lead in development. And right away, because we're castled, we have 3 or 4 pieces developed versus black's 2. Um, Opening up the center or trading and allowing more lines to be opened up. So, for example, if black did nothing and then we played a move like d5, this would be an example of closing the center because the pawns are stuck. They can't capture, they can't move forward. It's really rigid and tight, and that we call those positions closed positions. So we want to open up the position. So that happens when there are pawn captures in the center. So after e takes d4, we take back with the knight, and there's already a trap set up here. So if you have a lead in development, things are just going to work out for you. Like there's just going to be tactics that work in your favor. And this is an example of that. So here, if black saw, okay, I've got 2 attackers on this pawn and you've got 1 defender, and they went ahead and took this pawn, that would be a huge mistake because we could just take back. They have to take with the queen. And again, um, with the second move, we saw the queen and the king lined up on this e file. And so right away we should be thinking, okay, how do we take advantage of that? So here in this example, we were able to open up the e file, and now we can finally take advantage of that and play rook to e1, which pins the queen to the king and should win the queen and the game. So this is a little trap we set up here. And if they don't take, say they do something more normal, maybe they bring our queen out. This is a little different because our queen, like bringing our queen out in the opening, because our queen isn't able to be attacked very easily. If there was a knight that could come to c6 here, maybe the queen on d4 wouldn't be that great, but they just traded that knight, so our queen is actually quite protected here on d4, even though it's right in the center of the position. So we've already succeeded in opening up the position. We have a lead in development. So again, black is trying to catch up, trying to develop their own pieces, but we can take advantage of our better pieces. And the fact that this king is still in the center, that's a very big factor. If that king doesn't get castled, that's going to cause serious problems for black. So we see that right away with this move, knight to d5. This already puts black in a very strange predicament because if they take on d5, either with the knight or the bishop, they're going to open up this e line towards that queen and king, which we just saw can be very, very detrimental. So after knight to d5, black doesn't have a lot of options because if they played a move like queen d7, well, now we have one 2 attackers, and they only have 1 defender because that queen was defending that knight. On top of that, if they play a move like queen d6, to keep an eye here, we have this crazy looking move, bishop to h6. Just insane. Just leaving the bishop on pre because if they do take it, we have knight takes f6. Anytime our opponent moves a piece, anytime we move a piece, it is not defending a square that it was once defending. So here that pawn was defending the f6 square, and now it's not because it took on h6. So that allows this king is dead in the water, and the game should be over very quickly. We could probably win this rook on h8 as well. So very, very deadly. And after knight to d5, again, it's just very difficult. If they move the queen, there's lots of issues. And then if they take on d5, we take back. And then just like I said before, we get to open up this e file, and we're going to be very happy. So we just normally develop our pieces. We're threatening rook to e1. We couldn't play rook to e1 right here because nothing's protecting it. That would be a very bad way to hang a rook. So we have to protect it first. We play bishop d2. Now both the rook and the bishop are looking at that square. And here, black's position is so bad that his best move is to play king to d8, which is just so, so sad. Because there's just not a good way to get out of this pin with the rook. So, for example, if they castled, well, this rook was defending something, and now it's not. So queen takes a7 becomes very deadly, threatening queen a8, checkmate on the next turn. So they can't castle. They play a move like queen f6. We're going to check anyway, and he probably has to play king d8. If they play something like this, we can just pile up the pressure on the e file, keep that king in the center, because if they ever castle, that king was once defending that bishop, and now it's not, so we're just going to win a free piece. So we see there's a lot of ways for black to go wrong, and all we did was we developed, we castled, and we opened up the center. So that's the recipe for success when our opponent plays a bad opening, such as the Gunderam defense. So if you ever see your opponent not developing, not castling, not following those opening principles, now you know you want to open up the center. You want to blast open the position so your pieces can shine through and dominate your opponent's position. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.